everyone, and welcome to the Surgical Ergonomics podcast, where we will be discussing everything related to surgical and procedural ergonomics, the people, ideas, and technology that will help enhance your physical wellness and career longevity. I am your host, Geeta Lal. I'm an academic endocrine surgeon, speaker, consultant, and surgical ergonomics coach. Having experienced work-related musculoskeletal injury myself, I am committed to increasing awareness of and developing solutions to counteract the impact of poor ergonomics on the professional and personal lives of healthcare workers in procedural areas. Today's episode is sponsored by Q Optics. Surgeons, your neck shouldn't pay the price for precision. It's time to demand loupes that are built for you. Q Optics is more than magnification. Custom crafted through the lens loupes engineered and tailored to your unique facial structure and surgical posture. The ultra lightweight titanium build eliminates pressure points, red marks, and the chronic neck and shoulder pain caused by heavy, bulky, outdated optics. With the exclusive TrueFit measurement system, each pair is precisely tailored to your unique facial structure, delivering a customized stress-free fit and all-day comfort. The Ergo Direct Vision loupes with up to 60 degrees of declination keep neck flexion under 15 degrees, or go zero flexion with the Ergo Angle Deflection loupes for a straight-ahead gaze and complete ergonomic relief. And with crisp edge-to-edge clarity within an expansive peripheral view around the telescopes, your field stays wide and unobstructed. Transform your OR experience today with a 45-day trial and exclusive pricing for listeners of this podcast. Visit qoptics.com/Dr. Lal to learn more and schedule your demo with a local representative. And again, don't forget to use the code Dr. Lal to claim your discount. Your work demands precision. Your body deserves relief. Q Optics, designed for comfort, built for performance. By the way, Q Optics has also provided us with an Ergo Angle Deflection loupes and headlight combo giveaway. The details will be provided at the end of this episode, so stay tuned. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Surgical Ergonomics podcast. In today's episode, I'm really pleased to have as our guest Dr. Thomas Varghese Jr. He is the chief of the section of General Thoracic Surgery at the University of Utah, chief value officer both for ambulatory and inpatient services at the Huntsman Cancer Institute, and the associate chief medical quality officer at the Huntsman Cancer Hospital. He is also a professor in the Tenure-track in the Department of Surgery at the University of Utah School of Medicine. Tom is a health services researcher whose clinical, research, and operational experience spans the fields of innovation science and implementation science. He helped create the American College of Surgeons' Strong for Surgery program and is a co-PI on the National Cancer Institute's RO1-funded clinical trial on the role of precision exercise prescription, PEP, for elective lung surgery resection. Dr. Varghese has served in several leadership roles in organizations such as the Society of Thoracic Surgeons, the American College of Surgeons, NCCN, Thoracic Surgery Directors Association, the Cardiothoracic Surgery Network, and the Society of University Surgeons. He is, in fact, the immediate past president of the SUS, and he is currently the editor-in-chief for the Journal of the American College of Surgeons. If there was any free time with all of these activities, Tom loves to spend it with his family, hiking, and is actively engaged on social media. So I will provide all his contact info in regards to social media handles along with the show notes of our episode. So without further ado, Tom, welcome to our podcast.
Dr. Lal, it's an honor to be here. And for the listeners, the two of us have known each other for many, many years. Hopefully you get the sense of how much I think the world of Dr. Lal, and I'm looking forward to this podcast episode.
Likewise, I share those sentiments, and I think for the purposes of this, let's maybe switch to using our first names, if that's okay with you, since I've already said hi, Tom, and welcome to the podcast.
It lends yes, Geeta. It lends itself to the conversational nature of this podcast episode. Absolutely, not a problem.
Right, exactly. Okay, so if you would you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself, including your sort of background? Where did you grow up,
Yeah,
and
no, it's
your
I
and your training background, and then how did you
yeah.
actually arrive at your current role?
Absolutely, yeah. I have a very unusual or atypical life journey, as people know and heard at the recent SUS presidential address. But I was born in India, specifically from the southern part of India, from the state of Kerala. And as people know, that you can easily tell, put two things together, and you tell from my name that I'm a Christian from southern Kerala. But I came to the United States when I was a year old. My dad had come on a student visa, and so I grew up in this in Chicago and its suburbs. And then where the unusual part of my story turned was after my sophomore year in high school, my family actually moved back to India. And so I ended up going to, I lived back in Carolina for 9 years, went to college and medical school there, but I always wanted to be a surgeon. And I had aspired to be, to seek the best training programs and realized that, at least in my opinion, I thought that the best training programs were back here in the United States. And so after finishing med school and then doing a year of what we call a rotating internship, a transitional year, kind of a service back to the government. I came back here to the United States after taking the USMLE boards and spending a year in the research lab. I started as a prelim resident at Northwestern. And then, fortunately, they took me in as a categorical. And so I did my general surgery training at Northwestern and then my cardiothoracic surgical training at the University of Michigan. And then my first academic job was at the University of
Mhm.
Washington. So I was on faculty there for 8 years. I was the director of thoracic surgery at Harborview, which is the county hospital that serves 5 states in the region. And then got the opportunity of a lifetime when they recruited me about 10 years ago. Actually, July 1st was my 10-year anniversary here at the University of Utah, where I had the privilege of building up a thoracic surgery center of excellence from the ground up.
Mm.
And so my family jokingly says that I'm a nomad because I seem to be wandering in different places around the world. And the family always loves visiting wherever part of the country that I'm in. And so that's kind of my story of how I got here to where I've had. And I've had a very blessed life. I have great opportunities to meet people from around the world through, personal friendships, networks, academic circles, national organizations. And so grateful to be in the position that I'm in.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And I have the same sentiments, as you just said. I feel very blessed and grateful to be, where I am at as well in this phase of life, career, etc. So, for our listeners, I want to share with you that Tom and I have, as you heard him say, we've known each other for some time. We actually were formally introduced by our mutual friend, Dr. Moody Kapadia, who's a colorectal surgeon currently at University of North Carolina. We met, I think, Tom, it was at the American College of Surgeons Quality and Safety meeting.
That is correct.
Yeah, and I think during a break when Mooney introduced us, we started discussing kind of, let's say, aches and pains and ergonomics. So that's where our connection kind of then really started and continued on over the years as, my interest has evolved. I wondered if you could share with our listeners if that was indeed kind of, your first time thinking about surgical ergonomics, or had you been thinking about it before? And then how have your kind of interests
Blossomed.
come
Yeah.
to this point where they are right
Yeah,
now?
so
Yeah.
for the listeners, because of kind of this international background that I had, let me clue you in on some parts of my health as well. I was born with mild congenital hip dysplasia. I knew that very early on. I played a lot of basketball. I mean, I started in tennis, and my father wanted me to continue there, but I fell in love with basketball. And at some point, I had this foolish dream of being the first Indian NBA pro basketball player. But you quickly realize that, it's not the 10,000 hours of practice and you need some innate talent there to get to that high level as
Yeah.
well. But I ended up playing basketball both here in the United States in high
Mm.
school. And then when I went abroad in India, I played in college. I actually played in college, and then our med school also had a basketball team as well. And we were actually quite good. I mean, we won the district tournament. We
Mhm.
played in state tournaments. I was when I was captain of the basketball team, we were runner up for a national
Oh, wow.
basketball
Okay.
tournament. It was still probably the sorest point of my life. We lost on a last second three pointer. So it still bugs me decades later, type of thing. I had my first, orthopedic injury when I was a sophomore in high school. I had right knee pain for a few years and then required knee surgery. It's actually where I fell in love with surgery because I was actually at the age of 15, one of the earliest arthroscopic knee surgeries in the Chicagoland area. It was done at Loyola Hospital. But I was just fascinated by the number of people it took to take care of me because I lost count. I was just trying to count the number of people I came into contact
Mhm.
with. And you start realizing this with any surgical procedure. There's hundreds of people involved in your care. If you start counting from the check-in process to the person who
Mhm.
takes you to the pre-op holding area to the nurses who check in, you just lose count of all that. We didn't know much information back then about orthopedics and recovery. So as a 15-year-old, I was actually non-weight bearing for about 3 months after surgery, which is
Wow.
like unheard of now. Now in the orthopedic literature, people get people up and walking right away. But
Hmm.
that was
Hmm.
kind of my first inkling, and it kind of inspired my path towards pursuing a medical career. But I knew with my hips at some point I would have to have addressed that during surgical training, dealing with the usual aches and pains, or I thought it was aches and pain, usual aches and pains. Didn't really do much reading beyond it. You would ask your fellow residents, and they're like, "Oh yeah, got some back pain, I've got some neck pain, some shoulder pain." Just thought it's the rigorous part of our profession. Unfortunately, wasn't really paying close attention to my health during surgical training, so that didn't help. Like I tell this to people all the time, just eating a lot of crap, and then unfortunately gained about 50 pounds during surgical training too.
It's
But
common for all of us. I was 30
it's
pounds heavier during
yeah, it's
residency,
just
so
horrible. I mean,
hey,
it's like
yeah,
this was an
yeah.
era, pre-80-hour work week, coffee
Hmm.
donuts available at every single conference. At the University of Michigan, when I was doing my fellowship training, there was a Wendy's inside the University of Michigan at that point, which is open 24/7. Yeah, you name it, the temptation all around you. My first hip surgery, my left hip needed to be replaced when I turned 48. And so this was just before the pandemic. I knew it was coming. I'd had visits with orthopedic surgeons around that. And so, that part I was like, okay, I was born with congenital hip dysplasia. That's on
Hmm.
me.
Hmm.
Probably, the unhealthy lifestyle during surgical training didn't help. Was diligent, paid attention to the recovery, came afterwards. It was then during the pandemic that everything snowballed. As people know me, I'm an extrovert by nature. I love meeting people. I love getting to know people. That's where I get energized. I do not do well in isolation by myself. And then you hit the
Hmm.
pandemic where the world came to a standstill. There's no surgical meetings, or you're just staring at a computer screen, no meetings.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I kind of was already in a funk there. And then it was just like all the health issues spiraled during that
I
time.
see.
So I needed my other hip, my right hip replaced. That one was expected, but then there were two health scares that came just blindsided me. I needed emergency surgery for kidney stones. I was
Wow.
asleep and woke
Wow.
up at 1 a.m., a right lower quadrant, excruciating right lower quadrant pain, collapse on the floor. Ambulance needed to take me to the hospital, and they found that there were four kidney stones lodged in my right ureter.
Ouch.
Needed emergency surgery there. That also I was like, okay, I have a family history of kidney stones. Like my dad had kidney stones. He also around about the age of 50 probably could do a better job hydrating, see how things go. But then the shocking one was the fourth surgery in a short period of time. And that was, I had been dealing with neck pain on and off for better part of about a decade. And this is where Gila and I had first started talking. And I was like, well, I notice I have neck pain. And for thoracic surgery, we go through the entire gamut. We go from minimally invasive surgery to big open surgeries. We wear loops, we wear headlights. Some
Hmm. Hmm.
surgeries, like even the shortest thoracic surgery is a few hours. Some of them are very, very lengthy. You find yourself in awkward positions. And when you don't pay attention and then you add up thousands of cases, decades of, kind of bad habits, it kind of all spirals. And so I've been dealing with neck pain on and off. And, my wife and I had traveled for our oldest, our daughters in the MD PhD program
Hmm.
down at the University of Texas. And we had gone for a white coat ceremony. And, the night before, pain was kind of building up. I thought, I'm in a strange hotel room. It must be something related to that. Went for a white coat ceremony. And then on the flight back, just pain kept building up. This was on a Sunday, coming back Sunday night. And then I'm on call. And so Monday morning, I'm making rounds with the team, and I'm at the ICU, and it's about, and I remember at the time vividly, it's almost like stamped, it's like 10:15 a.m. in the middle of rounds, and my entire left arm went numb. And of
Wow.
course, the panic hits, and I'm like, am I having a stroke? And I was like, but my neck is just absolutely killing me. And so I was like, I got to do something, and finished up rounds, went straight to the emergency room. God bless them. The ER was completely backed up. They checked my vitals were all okay. But with the combination of neck pain, they were like, something's going on back there. And so they needed an MRI. ER is backed up. Took about 6 hours for ultimately to get an MRI. They gave me some trapezius nerve blocks, trying to relieve some of the pain. It was the most excruciating pain I've ever had in my life. Like I thought kidney stone pain was bad. This was even multiple times worse.
I was going to ask about comparison to kidney
It
stones.
was
Okay.
good. Yeah, kidney stones are bad. Don't get me wrong. I mean, and for all those people who have those foolish myths out there that, oh, the kidney stone is the male version of going into labor. No, women going through labor is way worse than
Way
anything men
worse.
go through.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
the neck pain was just excruciating. And then they diagnosed me with having a herniated disc at the C6-7 level. Now, I've done a lot of combination cases with our neurosurgery colleagues, and so a surgeon who I know very well, Dr. Andrew Daly, immediately sent his fellow. He was actually scrubbed in surgery. Immediately sent his fellow down to meet me in the ER. They gave me some pain medications, and so this was on a Monday. And the plan was Dr. Daly had clinic on Wednesday, and so I came back to clinic on Wednesday. The pain was just unrelenting. And then Andrew's like, we can't take any time because especially now it wasn't just my arm going numb. I started having some arm weakness in my left arm as well. So he saw me in clinic
Wow.
Wednesday, Thursday morning at 8 a.m. I was on the OR table. And I'll be honest with you, Gita, that was, having had a lot of surgeries in my life, this was the one that terrified me the most. And I think it was just because all the other injuries, the hip replacements, the knee surgery, the kidney stones, I kind of knew that I'd come back from that. Like I had a plan. This is kind of, your sports analogy or your athlete's analogy. You're like, okay, you have an injury, you just go in, you work with the teams, you recover back. This one
Hmm.
terrified me because I went to sleep thinking, if my left arm function does not come back, that's the end of my career. And
Right.
and you got that, and you're trying to have a stoic appearance, and you're trying not to let on to your loved ones that this fear is going into your mind going forward. And so you can imagine the relief I had when I woke up in the recovery room and I noticed two things. That excruciating, stabbing, piercing pain, that was gone. I had the soreness from surgery because they went through a right anterior cervical or right neck
Hmm.
approach.
Hmm.
So, I had the soreness from surgery and, a sore throat, but that excruciating pain was gone. But then the happiest I was is that the first thing I did is I started moving my left arm and I noticed that numbness, that tingling, all that stuff was gone, and the fact that I could feel the strength was back. I mean, it was kind of a dramatic relief right then and there. And so to continue then came the eye-opening part because you would think that through all of this, you're like, okay, your eyes are open, you got to do something, got to figure out how to do this. I got to figure it out. The surprising thing happened next. 21 different surgeons reached out to me personally, most of them
Mm.
confidentially, to let me know about their own neck issues and neck surgeries. Think about that.
Wow.
I mean, I know through my circles, I know a lot of people out there.
Right. Right.
21 surgeons I know personally had neck surgeries for
From
C-spine
different specialties.
from different
From different
specialties. From
specialties.
different specialties. The most common was cardiothoracic surgery, and we'll probably get into some of the stats
Yep.
as well. Endocrine surgeons, colorectal surgeons. I had surgery. There was an anesthesiologist who had a neck fusion as well. So I had a
Hmm.
C6-7 neck fusion, and then worked very, very diligently with my entire team, the physical therapy team and
Hmm. Hmm.
occupational
Hmm.
therapy team, and it made a 100% full recovery. But that was the eye-opening part. And so that kind of then inspired me. Gita and I had already connected first because when I started having some neck pain and some issues, but this kind of inspired me to kind of do a deep dive further. And that was why I was so grateful when Dr. Lal and all our colleagues, launched the Society of Surgical Ergonomics, and then of course for this podcast and just getting the word out. But it is terrifying. I mean, I think that there is an epidemic, but it's a silent epidemic. And I think
Hmm.
that the biggest thing is the stigma. I mean, I think as surgeons, and I don't know if that's related to the culture, it's related to, is there an element of shame? Is it multifactorial? It's just that we need to talk about this more, and we need to share our stories and connect with people and just learn the best practices out there. But that was a mouthful. That was
Yeah.
a lengthy history
No,
to
but
get to this point.
no, it was actually, I should say, very telling on multiple counts. And I'm very grateful to you for sharing your journey and especially how you felt through it, because this last bit that you said, this is a repetitive story on the podcast. So if anyone's new to the podcast, if you pick up any episode, you'll see that it doesn't matter what the specialty of the person who happens to be a guest that week is. There is a pattern of this, having pain for a long time. And I'm not talking about the things that, Tom, you were prepared for, as you said, the congenital issues that you had been kind of preparing for. This is the sort of stuff we ignore. There's neck
Yeah.
pain, there's shoulder pain, there's lower back pain. And all we want to do is get back to the work that we're doing. We accept the symptoms as part of the job. We don't share. And if we share, we say, yeah, I mean, we all have this. It's not just me. The second theme that keeps coming up over and over again is that we don't kind of listen to the check engine lights, if it were, in our
Yeah.
bodies. And I am
You hit
guilty
it right
of
on
the
the head.
same. Okay. I find so many parallels in the story that I experienced, which I've shared on my website and various episodes of the podcast, and that as well. Recently, I did grand rounds at the University of Utah. So there is this thing that we don't listen to check engine lights. Our engine has to break down completely, and then we'll do something about it. And then, even then, I mean, I've interviewed various surgeons, and the episodes are forthcoming, where they've experienced this excruciating pain and their arm goes numb and they're in the middle of a case and they will finish the case. Or they woke up with pain and they'll still do their 4 patient list for today with the help of the resident before they go see neurosurgery. Call it, we need a 10 by 10 plank whack on the head before we actually start to think about what we need to do. And then I will say that if your experience, mirrors that of other surgeons and mine, which is like, even when you're thinking about your own sort of, oh my God, am I going to be able to, how is this recovery going to be? Am I going to have the function back? You're thinking about your patients because you're like, how am I going to get back to work? How do I tell my colleagues about this? So that shame, that stigma, the culture, it's very pervasive. And I'm not saying this to vilify the culture. I'm saying there's many good things about it because that's what gets us to where we are. It makes us good as our job. It makes us compassionate surgeons, but we have a history of not using that compassion for ourselves.
I think that's absolutely, and I agree with all those different themes. A couple of things that were eye-opening to me. I mean, I think,
Yes, please.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
so there's a myth out there that men are idiots, and we may be idiots in certain domains and everything, but in this particular
I
context,
see.
both men and women do equally bad jobs in terms of men and women
Mm-hmm.
surgeons.
Mm-hmm.
With the paying attention to check engine lights or whatever that is. Men historically, when you just look at the general population, they don't do a great job in terms of preventive care or going to a primary care physician, where women do a little bit better because, they visit their OB/GYN docs and, they're paying attention to breast health,
Right.
cervical health. But in this particular domain, I think in musculoskeletal health, among surgeons, I think both men and women are doing an equally bad job. And I think that, when we say the culture, there's certain elements to it. Just
Mm-hmm.
like in sports tend to attract people who obviously they have hand-eye coordination and they have talent in the sport, but they embrace that hard coaching, discipline, practice, trying a, continuous improvement type of thing. And you see that analogy in the surgical world as well. Very hierarchical system,
Mm-hmm.
don't admit your weaknesses, keep coming back. You did bad in one case, don't worry about it. There's another opportunity to keep going forward. And
Mm-hmm.
many of those things that lend to success in our surgical career are probably the detriments when we come to taking care of our own personal health. You
Hmm.
ignore the warning signs. You just think that with through sheer grit and determination, you can overcome any opportunity. I mean, heck,
Hmm.
I thought that stupidly. I was like, hey, I've got neck pain, no problem. I'll just stretch my neck a little bit and no problem. I've got to come back the next case. You don't appreciate the downtimes. And so for many of us, we don't appreciate the time away from work, that's also an important period of time. Rest is important, sleep is important, keeping attention to our health is important. That the better physically healthy we are, the better we actually do at our job. That the rest is equally as important as the focus just becomes on being hard on yourself and you're just driven and you're just constantly going, going, going without any downtime. And unfortunately, we've lionized a lot of people. And I say the following sentences not to disparage any of the giants in our
Hmm.
world, but the surgical residency program was designed by a person who is addicted to cocaine. I mean, I think that,
Right.
we have to at some point acknowledge that there are elements
Yes.
in our surgical heritage that probably we should question a lot more. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, Gila, you and I were probably the last people who trained in the pre-80-hour work week, and it was like at the tail end. Like for me, it was
I
like a
agree.
fellowship
Yeah.
when the 80-hour work week kind of rolled
S-
out. And I remember a
Same.
lot of people pushing back, saying this is going to be the end of surgery. But then when you talk to our medicine colleagues, they were like dumbfounded because they were like, really? You have 80 hours per week to train somebody and that's not enough time? I mean, it's just, this is where the benefit of asking people sometimes get outside vantage points, outside your circles is helpful. And I think for this, it's just we as a profession and we as surgeons are just unfortunately very susceptible to these type of things. We don't pay attention to our check engine light. We, think that sheer will and determination can overcome any obstacle at all times. We do not ask for help. I mean,
Right.
and then of course, at least for myself, it was just admitting that I had all these musculoskeletal issues when you're trying to break glass ceilings and get into
Right.
positions that nobody else has ever done with your type of background. You don't want to admit any sign of weakness whatsoever. Um, uh, and so I
Right.
think it's just like the perfect storm. All these different elements just kind of lined up, and then sadly you find out when you have something like this that you are not alone in this. There are a lot of people out there, which is sobering
Exactly.
to say the least.
Right. Yeah. As you found out, Tom, as you said, 21 surgeons called you. But I want to point out to our listeners that, there's actually only recently been sort of more comprehensive data on Tom's specialty. So in 2023, there's a paper published in the Journal of Thoracic and Cardiovascular Surgery, I think online in 2023 and then in print in 2024.
That is correct.
It's by Matthew Andrews and co-authors, and it was a national survey of occupational musculoskeletal injuries among cardiothoracic surgeons. And as if Tom getting those calls wasn't sort of an eye-opening, experience, that is, you realize you're not alone. Here are the numbers. It was survey-based data, of course, as most of these studies are. There were 600 cardiothoracic surgeons, and the overall prevalence of musculoskeletal injuries was 64%. And what's even more, shocking, well, maybe not to me anymore, but 30% of those affected surgeons required time away from work. 20% required surgery or the use of narcotics. And in keeping with what Tom has described and what you've heard other surgeons describe on the podcast, cervical spine injury was the most common injury due to operating, followed by lumbar spine injury, and then shoulder injuries, etc., are lower. If you looked at comparing cardiac versus thoracic surgeons had slightly lower odds ratios compared to cardiac surgeons. And then this is the piece, Tom, I want to talk about a little bit more because, we started talking about the culture of surgery and the similarities between elite athletes and surgeons, but this is the aspect of elite athlete culture that we could learn something from, right? Like when they get injured, there is a whole team, specialized physicians, physical therapists, etc., to get them back to, their high functioning level. And what was telling in this survey study was that 90% of the surgeons reported that their institutions didn't provide sufficient ergonomics education or support, and only 35% of surgeons thought that realizing their own community is supportive of implementing ergonomics techniques in the operating room and office, but they just don't know how to go about doing this. So there's a lot to unpack. So maybe we could spend some time talking about what you learned during the journey and what you think as someone who is a leader in this specialty, what can we do moving forward at various levels, education, curricula, institutional dynamics, this culture piece. What can we do to kind of try to change the situation and move the needle on this?
Yeah, no, great questions, Gita. So I was one of the 602 respondents to this survey. I mean, it was led by the senior surgeon, the senior author on this, Jeff Yang at Mass General,
Yes.
is a dear
Hmm.
friend. And he and Yolanda Colson and the group at Mass General
Yep.
were the
Hmm.
ones who led this. It was a remarkable study. I mean, eye-opening. When it was presented at our national meeting, led to a lot of discussion and conversations. And to their credit, the national organizations, the Society of Thoracic Surgeons, the American Association of Thoracic Surgery, they've kind of responded. I mean, they're starting to feature sessions now at their national meetings. Dr. Lal was actually one of our invited guests during
Hmm.
the Society of Thoracic Surgeons meeting a couple of
Right.
years ago, where we talked about these type of things. But I think that the harder question is to answer is about what do we do next? You know,
Hmm.
some people are like, well, should we continue to collect data? And, I think that we should. We need to be very thoughtful about this. Now, the question comes, is it survey based or is it, do we incorporate it as part of training programs? Devil's in the details, but I do think that periodically we need to keep a look at the data and track trends.
Hmm.
602 surgeons responded to this survey. Some people may say that, okay, it's a bias survey. It's people like myself who actually went through things that responded. But then that means, again, going back to the silent epidemic, you start wondering about,
Right.
okay, what are the number of people who are dealing with mild to moderate pain who didn't
Right.
respond to the survey?
Hmm.
What is the breakdown when we talk about trainees? This was 602 practicing CT surgeons who responded
Exactly.
to this. Is the situation worse amongst trainees? And I think that there's a lot of opportunities for us to do some deep dive. But that's one part, data acquisition. Really, we're
Hmm.
talking about culture change and what do we do next. One theme that I hit on during my SUS presidential theme was this common Latin phrase or a favorite. It's an oxymoron. It's called festina lente, which means make haste slowly. And you say,
Hmm.
what the heck does that mean? And I think that what that means is, sometimes the fastest way to address a situation is to often slow down and be much more deliberate about it.
Hmm.
There's a lot of popular books out there, Atomic Habits from
Hmm.
James Clear
Hmm.
is probably the most popular book about habit formation and change. And he introduces the concept of, 1% better every single day. And I think that that lens is what's going to help us address this situation. There's not going to be a quick fix. We need
Hmm.
to do multimodal or types of multiple modal types of interventions. Outreach talks like Dr. Lal giving a grand rounds, the Society of Surgical Ergonomics, and a dedicated society, partnering with societies, getting the information out there, see what that is. But ultimately, the solutions have to be on an individual level. And I think it really just comes down to is organizing our life. If you, again, going back to the sports analogy,
Hmm.
if we talk about, my favorite sport in basketball, LeBron James is playing basketball at an elite level at an older age, which has not been seen ever before in the history of the
Hmm.
NBA. LeBron James spends a quite a big chunk of money, over $1 million plus on three individuals that are his massage therapist, his physical therapist, and his sports psychologist. You could also add in a nutritionist also into that part.
Hmm. Hmm.
Things that you don't normally think about as in association with an elite basketball player.
Basketball.
But
Right.
but
Right.
again, your mindset is proper. Your physical therapy, massage therapist, that person is paying attention to, the musculoskeletal regions of the
Mm-hmm.
body, about constantly assessing to see, are there areas of weakness, are there areas of injury, what do you do that? And then a nutritionist just paying attention to the food he takes in. And he's very, very disciplined about that. The
Right.
other surprising part about all this, Gita, was the fact that we as physicians and we as surgeons underappreciate that investing in ourselves is not selfish. Taking
Right.
time off to pay attention to ourselves is not selfish. It's selfless because you are doing things so that you can go forward and have a much more longer career in your
Mm-hmm.
lives. If you think about, there's 5 stages in a career. There's training, there's early career, mid-career, late
Mm-hmm.
career, and then what do you do after retirement? All those different parts of your time period is critically important. Our surgical training is lengthy. I mean, I did 10 years of training after medical school. I've
Mm-hmm.
been 18 years in practice, starting my 19th year in practice. I consider myself squarely mid-career right now, but I'm at the age of 54. I realize that probably around about the age of 65, I'm going to be thinking about that's my late career. And then if I think about age 70, 72, whatever, I decide to hang it up or retire, I have to actively plan for these type of things, and which is something we don't do very well. We just kind of
Mm-hmm.
pay attention to what we're doing right now, but we don't think about the long term. And so to me, I think the eye-opening part is, I think ergonomics is a lifelong journey. I think it's just like being in great health, as your health is a lifelong journey. And I know that
Right.
for
Right.
myself, like, whatever good or bad I've done to my body, I've been doing this for 50 years, you know, that the solution is not going to come fast. It's like I'm
Right.
not going to be able to snap my fingers and all of a sudden become in the best shape of my life. I think that I have
Yeah.
to really think about a habit formation and things to do each and every single time, but really with that focus of long-term longevity. And I think that
Yeah.
that's where hopefully the solution will come. And, podcasts like this are great, awareness, raising awareness techniques.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that we just need to partner with anybody who's willing to be in this space, be open to any and all suggestions,
Mm-hmm.
face some backlash because some people are going to think that these are touchy-feely topics that we shouldn't talk about, and that our health should just be personal. I don't agree with that,
Right.
but I think that we just need to keep chipping away for the long-term
Right.
solution.
Well said. And, I agree with you. This was the impetus for the podcast because I felt like there are only so many grand rounds that people can give and talk about because you're
God bless you for
touching,
doing that.
yeah, you're touching, it's not just me, right? It's other members in the Society of Surgical Ergonomics, physical therapists, ergonomists, etc., everyone who's talking about this, right? But I do disagree with you somewhat about placing the onus squarely on the surgeon, right? Because if we look at the definition
Yeah,
of ergonomics, it is the interaction of humans with a system. That's the International Ergonomics Association definition. But if you really think about it, it's adapting the work environment to the worker, right? Whereas in surgery, we do the opposite, right?
great point. Yeah.
We force the worker to adapt to the work environment, which is less than ideal. And it is the antithesis of what ergonomics actually means. So, yes, we absolutely have to take the onus for our own health and physical and mental well-being. We can all do a good job of that, especially surgeons, since we dole out that advice but then fail to apply it to ourselves. And that's why everything that you said and all the things we talk about on the podcast are important. But I don't want our listeners to think that they did something to cause this.
Oh yeah, and
Yeah,
yeah, absolutely.
there are absolutely, any survey, you rightly said, there are going to be people who go through an entire surgical career without experiencing any pain or injuries. Then there are going to be people who have had some sport injuries or genetic issues. Ehlers-Danlos comes to mind,
Yeah,
connective tissue
absolutely.
disorders that then, like it's the nature nurture part. But if you put those two extremes aside and take all the people that had neither of these, the rest of us still experience pain and musculoskeletal injury at a not inconsequential rate. And so I don't want to absolve our hospital systems. And I
Sure.
know you don't either. Yeah, I
Yeah,
don't. I
no,
know you
I
don't
get that.
either.
Yeah, so
I just
let me
want to make
clarify.
it clear.
Yeah,
Yeah, I just want to
yeah,
make it clear for our
yeah.
listeners.
So let me clarify. Like I agree. I think there's lots of people at I don't know if you want to call it at fault or if it's just been ignorant and see how things are. But so the challenges come in culture change. So there is
Right.
a great article out there. It's a landmark article in academia called Simone's Maxims. And
Hmm.
Dr. Simone.
I've read some of Simone's maxims.
Yeah,
Yes.
Dr. Simone is close to my heart because
Yeah.
Dr. Simone, when he wrote that article in 1999, he was actually the medical director here at the Huntsman Cancer Institute in Salt Lake City when he
Oh,
wrote that.
okay.
So it's a little bit of trivia for you to know. But he writes sentence one, his first maxim is institutions do not love you back. And in sound, it's kind of harsh, but the arc of an institution or an organization is much, much longer than your own individual career. And so, yes, you are correct. Institutions do have a role to play in this, and even medical device companies and things like
Hmm. Absolutely.
my glove size is 8.5. For me, it's very easy to use the surgical staplers and everything like that for my hands. I have
Hmm.
the grip strength and everything to utilize that. But I'm always amazed that there are more people with much, much smaller hands than mine that are trying to use these one size fits
Hmm.
all instruments. Like there's
Hmm.
no tailored instruments or things. And then when you talk to the device companies, they're like, well, that would be too expensive. And I'm like, well, it's probably because you haven't tried it. There's probably different ways, or what happens if the handles of the stapling devices come in like three different sizes. There's ways around it.
Hmm.
They just have decided,
Right.
they've
Right.
somebody's done the costs and figured out they don't want to go down that pathway. But again, this
We're pushing those conversations as
we're
part of a
pushing
society,
conversations
so
as
it's coming.
well,
Yeah.
the time off. I agree with all that institutions have to play a role, but again, now I'm wearing my C-suite hat. If nobody says anything,
Right.
how are you
Right.
going? Like, if no surgeon ever says, "Hey, I've got neck issues, back issues, things," like if nobody says anything, you can't expect an institution to magically, clairvoyantly try to figure out what the heck the problem is. And so I think
Mm.
that it's got to come, we have to speak up. I think we have to advocate for ourselves, we
Right.
have to speak
Right.
up. But I 100% agree with you. I'm not saying that all these problems are just surgeon or individual by themselves. We just have to advocate for ourselves better. And
Okay.
we need to reach out and we need to let people know. I mean, and I think that the strength is going to come in numbers. I think if
Okay.
we all band together or work through our societies, that's going to be a much, much more powerful voice than one individual voice. But I don't
Yeah.
want to minimize the importance of the individual voice. We have to speak up. And so I think part of sharing our stories is
Hmm.
a mechanism of raising awareness. But yeah, no, absolutely. I 100% agree with you, Gil. Yeah, please.
Yeah.
I apologize to anybody who someone misconstrued to say that it's all on us. I'm not saying that. But I do think that we have to speak up more and we have to fight the stigma and we have to say that
Right.
if we are admitting we have neck pain and back pain and shoulder pain, that is not a sign of weakness. I mean, that is just your
Right.
body's saying there's something wrong.
So on that note, okay, now I want to hear, because we've discussed this now for the last little bit, I want our listeners who maybe happen to be cardiothoracic trainees and residents, what are the tips and tricks that you now try to teach your trainees and fellows and the changes you've incorporated in your own life that they can do starting now to improve their careers? Because I may say these things, but they'll say, "Well, you're an endocrine surgeon. You're
Yeah.
not a cardiac surgeon." Because that's the other thing surgeons do. We only listen to certain people.
Yeah.
So
No, yeah,
let's go.
absolutely.
Let's,
So
yeah, yeah.
so for my specialty, the first sentence I tell you is it's not a question of if, it's a question of when.
When?
Every single CT surgeon is going to be dealing with some type of musculoskeletal issue in their career. You are not immune from this. It's just the nature
Mm,
of our work, lengthy operations, awkward
hmm.
positions, fixed rigid structures that you're adapting to. It's just, even robotic surgery and everything like that, we're starting to see ergonomic issues in robotic surgery as well. So I
I
think,
just heard that from another thoracic surgeon.
yeah,
Yes.
so that's number one. Every single person in my specialty will be dealing with some type of ergonomic issue at some point in their career. It's just a question of when. So with that in mind, I think that then comes follows through with is that ergonomic best principles is going to help all of us. And so we have adopted in our OR, I try to model that, is that,
Hmm.
we take micro breaks every once in a while. We try to pick times during a case where, we can do that. I'm acutely paying attention to all the team members, including our scrub nurses and circulating
Right.
nurses. The anesthesiologists, actually, you have to admire, they do a great job. Now, sometimes we criticize them for, swapping out multiple times and everything
I'm
like that. But
I'm guilty of doing that under my breath. I get it.
but
So,
but
yeah.
but at the same time, they model those type of things. And so, interestingly, I think Gila, you mentioned this during your grand rounds. This is where we can learn lessons from our other specialists.
Hmm.
Pancreatic surgeons do a phenomenal job of doing this. I remember doing Whipple
Exactly.
operations,
Yeah.
and the specimens out right before the reconstruction starts. Everybody takes a break, type of.
Right.
They just and we don't question that as
Hmm.
well.
Hmm.
That OR video that the Mayo Clinic
OR stretch. Yeah.
the
The
OR
Mayo OR
stretch
stretch.
video. I mean, we try to incorporate that. Now, we're not perfect with that. I mean, we talk about it during our timeout. We talk about it during our debrief very briefly. And, would I love to say that we do that consistently 100% of the time? Probably not. But, if you skip that in one case, you got another case coming up, you're like,
Hmm.
oh, hey,
Hmm.
I noticed that we didn't really take a break during this case. If this case, when we get to a point, I'll just make sure. Yeah. So some of the personal things I've done is I reached out to a surgical loops company, and all the surgical loops company have options and everything to
Yeah.
change the type of loops I have. It's very, very lightweight, where the angle is very acutely down, so I can keep my neck straight and look down at the same time, with a very, very light, kind of embedded headlight from there. And again, there's lots of options out there, and I would encourage you to take a look and see which one's best for you. That's number one. The other thing is I don't stay in the same position for a long period of times. In fact, the residents kind of
Right.
make fun of me. They see me walking back and forth sometimes, and I use it sometimes on the excuse of, "Hey, let me just quickly come over to the other side of the table just to see what you're looking at. Great, let me come back again." But just that movement and everything helps me
Hmm.
as well. And of course, with all the injuries and the surgeries I've gone through and everything like that, if any part of my body doesn't quite feel right, I will make sure to pay attention to this. I'm paying attention to check engine light as well. Other small little things, I try to do, exercise program. I have a Peloton bike, and, with the Peloton app and everything, you can just track to see, how much you
Hmm.
can do that. I try to incorporate strength training at least 2 to 3 times a week. Trying to pay attention to my diet. And again, I know that I'm a work in progress. I mean, it took me 50 years to get to the body I have right now. It's not going to be solved overnight. We have a massage chair. My wife bought that a couple of years ago,
At
and
home.
at
Okay.
home,
Hmm.
yeah, and so which has been great. Anytime I'm tired and everything, I go sit in the massage chair. Been paying attention to rolling pins and things like that, and so I'm just trying to figure out and constantly try to learn about new techniques that I can utilize for myself. Um,
1% better every day.
1% better every day. That is correct. And that's
Right.
the goal is like, am I better today than I was yesterday? Am I going to be better tomorrow than I am today? And it's a work in progress. And then, of course, I keep my eyes and ears open for anything out there. I talk to other surgeons. And if somebody says, hey, I tried this, I travel with a neck pillow when I'm traveling. And
Hmm.
so, and I'm always constantly asking people, it's like, hey,
I think we talked about that. I
yeah,
travel with my
absolutely.
own
We
pillow.
talked about
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
recently and everything.
Yeah.
So again, I'm,
Yeah.
shamelessly borrowing little tips and secrets from everybody as well. And so I try to model that and I'm very open about it. And I talk to all of our trainees. I talk to our trainees. We talk constantly as a division, even during division meetings. So we talk about these type of things and see how things are from there. And there is another surgeon in my division who also had neck surgery as well. So there are two of us, in
Now,
a
yeah.
division of
Yeah.
12 people, that's a good percentage right there. And so again, if
Right.
you believe the numbers and everything from that survey that Dr. Yang and colleagues did,
Hmm.
amongst 600 surgeons, 20% had surgery or constantly or chronically on opioids as a result of this. So I mean,
Yes.
these are
Yes.
serious numbers and alarming numbers. And so I think any little bit helps. But to answer your question, Gita, that those are the things that I do on a personal level, and but I'm the first person to open and admit that I'm constantly looking for solutions. We just recently reached out to our own physical therapy department,
Hmm.
and we're
Hmm.
working after Dr. Lal's grand rounds. It turned into a conversation, and we're actively working on trying to come up with some better solutions for all of our surgeons and trainees in our department
Trainees.
of surgery. But again, that's going to be a multi-year process. That's not going to be an
Right,
easy
right,
fix.
right.
And so any little bit helps to get to that, that the nirvana that we're aspiring for.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing those tidbits and, sharing your personal experience with implementing ergonomic best practices. And I'll also be the first to admit that I don't do them perfectly. But again, the aspiration is to be better than we were before, right? And to model this behavior for
Yeah,
the
the
next
positive,
generation.
I do
Yeah,
want to stress the positive.
yeah,
We are talking about this.
exactly,
And I think that
exactly.
is a remarkably positive change.
Right.
It's the first time in my career that we're actually having people openly talking about it. And so that's why I think the podcast helps, the Grand Rounds helps, the Society of Surgical Ergonomics helps. Every little bit helps.
Hmm.
And just like the 80-hour work week, like nobody's questioning the 80-hour work week anymore,
Hmm.
and everybody just gets used to it and everything like that. I'm hoping
Yeah,
for a day that this just becomes part of the routine. And this is also where my optimism is. Our younger generations are way smarter than all of us. They
I
don't
agree.
tolerate idiots, they don't tolerate stupidity. They're very, very vocal. And so I'm actually very confident that our younger generations are going to come forward and say, no, yeah, great. Thank you for the service you did, but we're not going to do the same stupid things you did. We're going to do things better. And so I
Right.
think that's where my optimism lies as well.
Yeah, no, I agree with that piece. I think it will, just like the surgical checklist, as you mentioned, it will take about a generation of trainees, I think 4 to 5 years, for this to not even be questioned, that we're doing, we're thinking about our ergonomics and we're doing, active measures to prevent injury. Our time is up. I can't believe how quickly, the hour went. And I just want to express my thanks again to you for supporting this cause and for starting these conversations, not only among kind of your colleagues and your trainees, but also in your role as leader and in the C-suite, making sure that we are taking steps to kind of move the needle, as we said earlier. So thank you once again for all the work that you're doing in this regard.
No, I thank you. I mean, thank you for building this platform. Thank you for the incredible work you're doing at the local, regional, and national levels. And God bless everybody. I think that
Mhm.
we welcome anybody who wants to be in the space, and I think that we all want to
Absolutely.
learn and do better together. So I look
Mhm.
forward to the work ahead. Really appreciate the time.
Like, likewise. Please remember to subscribe to the podcast and follow us on social media, Instagram, X, Facebook, and LinkedIn. We love feedback, so please reach out to us for topics, ideas, speakers, or if you ever want to be a guest on the show. Thank you for listening. To enter your name for the Ergo Angle Deflection Loops and Headlight Combo giveaway, please go to our podcast landing page at www.surgicalergonomics.com/podcast/ and fill out the contact form at the bottom of the page. Choose Other in the drop-down menu and indicate Loops giveaway in the message. We will do a drawing for the winner in December of 2025, so please spread the word among your colleagues and friends who might be in the market for new loops. Thank you.